Hey, Randy Joe here, and this is 1001 Reviews, the series where I plan on reviewing every single album from the 1001 Albums to Listen to Before You Die book. And today we're looking at Joan Armatrading's 1976 album, Joan Armatrading, the self-titled. Her self-titled album was released underneath the A&M label with producers Glenn Johns, with art direction from uncredited, nationality West Indies and UK, with a running time of 40 minutes and 32 seconds. Now, this is the third studio album from Joan Armatrading and the first on the A&M label, and also her biggest commercial album to date. And I was previously unaware of Joan Armatrading before listening to this album, so I went into this with a completely fresh look on her as an artist, and I feel like I came out of this thing feeling generally pretty satisfied with what I heard, although at the same time not completely blown away either. The first song, Down to Zero, is a great introduction to show off just how powerful Joan's voice can be, and especially the way she uses her voice with these certain inflections as she sings about having a lover who had left her for somebody else and then left her feeling very down and full of low self-esteem, and then when his relationship failed with this other woman, he came right back to her, and she easily took him back due to the fact that at this point had such low self-esteem and low standards. She really felt like she was at the bottom of the barrel, so she very easily took him back. And so it's a pretty sad and depressing song about really not truly loving yourself and, again, letting somebody else completely control how you feel. And Joan does a great way at showing this through her very emotive voice. Now, Joan, of course, is a singer-songwriter above all else, and her songwriting abilities do really start to show in the song Love and Affection, which is her biggest commercial single of all time. This was the song that really put her on the map for most people who are a fan of her work, and for good reason. It's a very simple concept of just really needing companionship and needing a lover beyond someone who's just a friend, due to the fact that you're feeling these constant feelings of loneliness. And even though this concept is so simple and overdone at this point, it is still really handled in a great way. It has these great backup singing baritone voices that come into the second half, as well as taking on a much more jazzy instrumental approach. In the last couple of minutes or so, it really derails and goes into this very jazzy sort of oriented zone, which works and complements Joan greatly, as her voice really works well with this soft jazz instrumental. These baritone voices too that sing just ever so gently once in a while throughout this track also just add so much texture and depth to Joan's voice. It really parallels between her smooth, soft singing and this deep backup vocal track. The song directly after this one again shows off her songwriting abilities, but with a much more subtle approach. It is not as jazzy, and it is not nearly as catchy, one would say. It's not really something that I would label as a pop track, but instead more of a lull in the album, but not necessarily in a negative way, just in a way to sort of ease you back into the soundscape that she's been doing so far in the album. And with this much more subtle instrumental that isn't so jazz focused, I do think it kind of puts her voice center focused, and with that in mind, really does show off just the smoothness of her voice. But that doesn't mean that she completely throws away all jazz elements, as this song is still very jazzy, and the one directly after this is easily the jazziest song on the album, especially in the piano and percussive work, which is, in my opinion, some of the most intriguing instrumental on the album. I really enjoy the track Join the Boys specifically for the instrumental, despite the fact that I might not enjoy the substance of this track or necessarily her voice either compared to the rest of the album. Really, Join the Boys is great for the instrumental alone, and that's it. But other than that, this song isn't necessarily too incredible or anything worth note of. But the song where really she comes together and has the greatest oomph of all is the final track on the album, called Tall in the Saddle. It has her strongest performance by far, has some of the most catchy riffs of all with these really great instrumentals. The chorus especially, where she flourishes over the instrumental and sort of speaks of this man who has wronged her so many times, and so she's really had enough, but she will always cherish what they had. This is really all greatly combined and creates a very strong, cohesive track. And especially in the last 2 minutes, the instrumental sort of overflows and kind of breaks like a dam, and the rest of the song kind of coasts off this very simplistic instrumental. It is so rewarding in a way after much of the song is building up and then crashes out into this very easygoing instrumental to close off this album. And with all that in mind, Joan Armatrading ends up being a pretty fantastic singer-songwriter. However, I do have to say that throughout this entire album, I never felt like anything I've heard thus far is anything too significant or comparable to a lot of other singer-songwriters at the time or prior to the release of this album either. And the way I see it is, if she's putting out an album in 1976 that isn't on par or greater than her contemporaries at the time, then is it really an album you must listen to before you die? And on top of all that, do I feel like, me personally, I got a lot out of this album that I have not yet heard, or do I think it is so significantly done that it is definitely worth a listen before you die? I would have to go ahead and say no. The soft rating of this album came to a 7.4 out of 10, but I will bump that up to a 7.5 hard rating out of 10. And of course, again, as I said, I don't think this is anything too grand or too significant for the singer-songwriter genre specifically. I just feel like, for the most part, none of this album is going to last with me in the end. So for that, I will definitely say not essential. It is not an essential listen before you die. But if you have an interest in singer-songwriters, specifically in the 70s, and more of a jazzy approach, then yeah, you might enjoy this album, and you should just go ahead and give it a listen to see what you think. But anyways, that pretty much does it for this review. Let's see what the next album you have to listen to is in the 1001 albums to listen to before you die book. All right, random number generator 1 to 1001, generate. 40. James Brown, Live at the Apollo, 1963. So give James Brown's Live at the Apollo 1963 album a listen, and I'll review that in about 1 week from now. And if you like this video, please hit like and subscribe if you want to follow along and listening to every album from the 1000 albums to listen to before you die book, where I will review and decide whether or not I feel they are absolutely essential to listen to before you die. And as always, my name is Randy Joe, and I am signing off.